Hi, we're going to go through Rachel installation scenario 3, which is Rachel added to home or school router or home or school network. And this also works with the Rachel Pi, which...
We're talking about Rachel, either the content put onto one machine or a Rachel Pi connected to a home network. And I'll show you exactly what we mean. First, I wanted to go through, it does require the actual hardware for a router. Most people have a router at home. I'll show you what one looks like. Most schools have one, and if not, they're usually about $30 to acquire. It does work easiest with Windows devices. For all intensive purposes, you can say it only works on Windows devices, though there are ways to work around with Linux right now. It does require some technical work, so you have to have some ability to work with a computer, but we'll make this really easy through a step-by-step video here. The pros and why this is so important. One, unlike Rachel Pi, this works in parallel with the internet or other offline solutions. A lot of folks know Khan Academy Lite. There are other things that run off of Raspberry Pi on the network, and you want to be able to connect or view content from the internet and from Rachel and from those other things all at once. This means that you can view the internet and Rachel at the same time. So maybe if you have a poor internet connection and you want to use the videos on Rachel and maybe just email on the internet, you can do this, though the internet is not required. It builds a network of computers for the content management, and that means that you can add content on one location and all the computers will view it. There's very minimal additional hardware required. It is just that router and maybe a Cat5 cable or two. The USB content, and this is critical, can be transferred to just one device, and then the USB can be moved on to a different scenario. So if it takes 2 hours to transfer all of Rachel USB's content to your computer, you only have to do this once, and then the USB can move on to somewhere else. And lastly, this does support all devices as clients. So all devices will be able to access the router, and through their web browser, will be able to access Rachel content. And I'll show you a little bit about what all of this means as we go through this how-to video. So first, it starts very similar to the first video in that you will get a Rachel USB stick, and this will either be someone who's provided it to you, or it's come in the mail, or you've just found the content has already been installed on your computer. And I've been doing these videos for about an hour, and we're still installing that same version of Rachel that I started before I started these videos. So I'm going to take one that's just got the content on it, and I'm going to plug it into my computer, and that'll find it, and it'll open up our Rachel screen like it does normally. But first I want to set up the router device. And
Okay, we're continuing our installation of Rachel onto an existing home network. If you don't know how to set up a home network, or you haven't yet, we'll put up another video for the basics of home networking. It's really something we encourage, especially for use with Rachel. And all it requires is an additional piece of hardware called a router. And this is just a standard consumer router. They're about $30. They're sometimes less than that nowadays. We can use pretty much any old technology. And then in the back of a router, there's 4 ports called LAN ports, and 1 port called a WAN port, and this is connected to the internet right now. So this is an actual router, it's working, it's connected to the internet. When you install Rachel, you can install it on a network that has internet or does not have internet. It doesn't change Rachel's functionality at all. So maybe you've got a 3G modem, maybe you've got satellite, maybe you've got some slow DSL. It doesn't matter. Rachel works in tandem with the internet or without the internet, and I'll show you both. So what you need to do is connect one computer to this router that's going to run Rachel. So you only need Rachel running on one computer, and you can connect it to this router via Wi-Fi, via a LAN cable, which is probably what we recommend, or any other, it's probably already connected to the computer, or to the router, excuse me. And so I'm shutting down an old version of Rachel. I just want to show you how this does work. You're already connected to your router. So for us, that router is called World Possible, and I'll just show you here that via Wi-Fi I'm connected to the router World Possible. And then on my computer, I've got Rachel here. I just opened it up. I've got the start.exe. And so this is just like running Rachel on any individual machine, but this machine is attached to a home network. We want to show you what this does when it's attached to the home network and why it's so beneficial. So what you see is this computer here is running Rachel. When you get to Rachel, it's on local host. What you need to do is find the IP address of this particular computer. And the IP address is assigned by the router. So I'll show you one way to find your IP address right now, and then we'll go through another video of how there are alternative ways to find your IP address. When you get a home router, it has a default IP, and that IP is the address that every electronic device has on a network. And in order to find it, usually it's on the back of the router somewhere. This router actually has a unique feature that says default address is, I don't know if you can read that, routerlogin.net, and it's got the username and password. So I can go to routerlogin.net, or I can try some sort of other IP address scenario. So at routerlogin.net, And this brings me to asking me for admin, and my password is password, and I can log in. Try that again. Log in. Or while that's searching for updates, I believe this router actually has the IP address of 192.168.1.1. So that should get you to the same screen as this Netgear router. Each router is going to have a different IP address. And again, it's asking me for admin password. And so I'm at the router interface screen. And this screen will look different for every different type of router. We're not going to go through them all, but there's some basic principles that can be pretty helpful in discovering the IP address of, again, this particular computer that is running Rachel. And so on this router configuration, somewhere usually in the Wi-Fi or advanced, you want to see, and here we go, something called attached devices or connected devices or client devices. And so I click attached devices here. And this is so that I can figure out what the IP address is of my computer. I'm just going to try and refresh that and see if I was just being a little impatient. Okay, great. And so what we've got here is these are the names of the devices attached to that router. So now we're at the attached devices screen. This first attached device is my phone, which is doing this recording. This next attached device is this computer that I'm working on right now that's running Rachel. It's a T61. Computers all have names that we've assigned them or the manufacturer has, but what's important is this IP address. And so this IP address is now the IP address of this computer, which is broadcasting Rachel over this router. So if I were to go to another computer, which I've got right here, and again, this can be any type of computer. This is, happens to be a Mac. Then this computer is probably already on the network that you're looking for. Look, it's already on World Possible. If not, you want to connect to the network. I'm assuming you've already got a home network set up, so these computers are on the same network. And then just like when you would open the internet before, I'm opening just a Google Chrome. And because I have internet, you'll see I can type in something like yahoo.com. And it'll load. And for a lot of people who are using Rachel, they have some amount of internet, but they don't have very good or reliable internet. And so in that instance, I want to navigate to this computer, which is running Rachel, which, if you remember, had an IP address of 192.168.1.3. And so I'm going to type in, just where I had typed in Yahoo, 192.168.1.3. And I press enter, and now I'm on Rachel. So I can navigate between tabs, I can navigate between different devices. All I'm doing is telling this client computer, or this could be a phone, this could be a tablet, or anything else, to go through the router and not out the back to the internet, but actually back to the machine that's running Rachel. So now I've got Rachel running on all the computers and all the devices in my home network. And this is really powerful because now if I ever want to change things on Rachel, if I ever want to track who's using Rachel on the other machines, I've got all of this kind of at my fingertips because it's all running from a home server. And it also runs in conjunction with the internet. So for those of you who have limited internet access, you don't have to get on and off Rachel. Another thing that's really kind of special about this is this doesn't have to be the only instance of Rachel or any other kind of service running. So when I say that, there are groups like Khan Academy Lite. So a lot of people would like to run Khan Academy Lite in conjunction with Rachel. And so if Khan Academy Lite you had on something like a Raspberry Pi or on a different machine, you can plug this machine also into the router. And I'll just do this just so you guys can see what this looks like. This is a Rachel Pi in English card. So we'll have another instance of Rachel running, but you'll get the idea, I hope. And so I've plugged this in. I've got a basic Cat5 cable. I'm going to plug in and I'm going to add this to the network. So, excuse me one second here. So I've plugged this into a Raspberry Pi. This could be another computer. This can be anything else that's just another device on your network. it is plugged into our network, and then I've got to give it some power. So let's grab just a battery here. And I'm going to turn it on. So now, just like this computer has an IP address that's running Rachel, this Rachel Pi will have an IP address that's running Rachel. And again, I've just got to discover what that IP address is. So I'm back at my router navigation screen. I'm going to press refresh. And so now what we've got here is something called Rachel Pi, which now has an address of 192.168.1.5. And so maybe this is Rachel in Espanol, or maybe this is Khan Academy Lite, or maybe this is any other content that you want to serve on another machine. And I'm going to go back to this other computer, which is just connected to the router. And so this is 192.168.1.3, remember, is this laptop. And that same address with the 5 at the end is this laptop. And then all of your websites are coming out through the cable modem and back if you have them. If not, again, not an issue. So I'm just going to try replacing the 3 here with a 5. And now I'm on a different version of Rachel. I mean, the content is the same, but it's being put out by this little device instead of by this computer. And so you'll see if I tried something like I'm just going to try .6, I won't get anything because there is no device that has that address. So the next step of this is assigning static IP addresses. So every time a device connects to the router, it gets assigned one of these IP addresses, and this changes over time. But there is an ability to assign static IP addresses, and that means that they won't change. So every time this computer connects to the router, it is the same address, and that way you can bookmark locations for all of the other computers to access. And I'll go through assigning static IP addresses in another video. Thank you.